Hello everyone, my name is Álvaro Sabu. I'm the author of Vue.js, and today I want to show you how to transform this into this. When you're creating 3D scenes on the web by using Vue.js or even just 3DS, your scenes at the beginning might look a little bit dull, plain, and that's because we need to add extra configurations to make it more realistic. We have a scene with a sphere and a plane that serves as a floor, and we have some lighting. The problem is that in real world, all the objects that are in the scene with light will cast a shadow, and some of the objects will receive that shadow. In this scene, you can notice that there is no shadows at all. So that's the first thing that we need to achieve. To do that, we're going to go to the app.view, which is the one containing our trace canvas. So once we enable the shadows, we need to go to the lights and tell which lights we want to cast shadows. So we're going to use the property cast shadow. If I save, we're going to see that there is no change here, right? And that's because we need to add it as well to the objects. So I'm going to go to my trace mesh here. That is the sphere. Okay. And I'm just going to add cast shadow. But I also need to tell which objects are going to receive the shadow. So there is another property called receive shadow that I can enable. So once I save, I still see nothing. And that's because we're using a material that doesn't actually play with the lights. So since we are going to do a realistic scene, we're going to change the materials that we have in our scene for another material called trace mesh physical material. If we save, now we can see that our scene looks quite different. Another thing that we need to play with is some of the properties of the material, because right now we're using a physical material, and materials in the real world have several other properties other than just the color. For example, we can change the roughness of this material. Okay, so we could change the roughness to something like 0.1, and we can also play with the metalness. How metallic or plastic do we want our object to be? So let's just change first the roughness. And you can see now that there is a small dot here that represents where the light is coming. We can also change the metalness, and we can make it like, for example, really metallic. And we are going to add something that will change the game, which is environment maps or HDR maps. Okay. So for that, we have a special component on Vue.js CentOS, which is called the environment. So the way to use it is that we're going to wrap it in a suspense. Why? Because it has an asynchronous operation on the hood. It's going to load a texture, image texture, okay? It comes with several presets. I'm going to use the sunset one. So if I hit save and restart, you're going to see now that there is something reflecting on the material. So you can see that there is like a port here, like a house, and then the sea here. We can actually see it on the background and change this teal color with the actual map. So if I set the background now, you can see the actual port that is reflected on the image. And that's all for today's Mighty Bytes. So I really hope you enjoyed the conference and see you around. Ciao, ciao.
Hello, hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back from break. Before we go to our next speaker, we do have a bit of announcement that Ayo, AI Masterclass for Developers is now in the Expo. So if you want to supercharge your coding productivity with AI, Bitterbrains Inc. is working on an AI Masterclass to help developers harness AI tools efficiently. If you're interested, let us know what you'd love to learn. Take a quick survey with your input. So click that sign up to get notified and submit what you want to learn about. All right. Up next, we have Shen Qingchun, Vue Design and Implementation. Shen is a front-end developer enthusiastic about Vue and Vite, open source contribution, and the creator of Vuevine, which he will talk about today. Welcome to the stage, Shen.
Hello everyone, my name is Shen Qingchuan. You can also call me River. I'm a front-end engineer and also enthusiastic about open source development. I did a lot of translation in the past few years in Vue, Vite, and Rollup Chinese documentation. But for now, I'd like to call myself the author of Vuevine. I'm so glad to have today's opportunity to share this project with you in Vue Nation. So let's roll back the clock to see where we began. When I started learning Vue in 2018, Vue 2 was already a popular framework with a major ecosystem and toolchain. Until now, we all feel very natural to write Vue components in SFC. But we do have a few different ways to write Vue components, right? Someone who has experience in building component libraries might vote for JSX because of its flexibility. And Vue also has not bad support for JSX. Additionally, after my research, I found that there are indeed many users want to write multiple components in one file. I think maybe several reasons for this. First, is it really necessary to use a single file to contain just one component? Users who complain about this are probably annoyed by always need to create a new file, which is not a difficult operation but breaks our hot flow. Many developers may start from writing a very long component and then splitting, which can be very annoying when using SFC. And then switching between files in a large codebase project is even more dizzying. Let's keep these conclusions and see if there is any available solution in our community. There are two solutions trying to solve this problem. The first solution thought we need to extract reusable templates provided by Vue macros first and then merged into Vue use. The second one is Vue nested SFC, which is a Vite plugin. Let's start with the first one. Here is a demo code showing how it works. You may find something very complex and duplicated in your template. Then you want to extract it out as a reusable fragment. You can define a pair components to replace all the duplicated parts. You can also pass props to this reusable part, which is just like passing props to a component. But components are not only views, right? That solution seems to only give us a little sweet, but I am not satisfied. Let's see the second solution, Vue nested SFC. It's a quite complete solution, but the more I look into it, the more I'm convinced that the ideal solution should not be built on top of SFC. Approach of making toolchain support for this kind of design certainly be invasive to existing official version. I'm sure that we need a non-invasive solution, and that means we need to all build by ourselves. If you have ever used the Vue SFC playground, you can see the output result after compilation, which is a bunch of code that related to a Vue component object. So, supporting for multiple components in one file is actually quite easy, Thanks to Vue's good architecture design, it divides compiler into different layers so that we can start from any one. Theoretically, we just need to loop this process, produce multiple component objects, and put them together. It decreased a lot of work when creating our new toolchain. Next, let's talk about the syntax design. I believe the React style is a more natural way to define components, because just writing a function is enough. I really like the DX that JSX provides, but why do I abandon it in Vue.Vine? JSX is too dynamic. It's too hard to be analyzed by Vue compiler to generate optimize information. I don't want to lose developer performance benefits brought by Vue 3's optimization, and Vue has a lot of powerful built-in features for template. After Vue 3 providing the script setup pattern, I found that's very suitable to be put inside a function, and I know that's the time to start. So, here is the solution that Vue.Vine provides. We can define a component as a function and use the template as the return value. In today's JS ecosystem, since we have a bundler toolchain like Vite, we can easily create some compile magic. This function is seen as function in source code, but a Vue component object in runtime. But as a user, you don't need to care about these underlying implementation details. A divine.ts is just a valid TS file, nothing different from what you are familiar with. And we are easy to integrate with existing toolchain and leverage superpower from VS Code. A divine.ts file could be treated as two parts. The yellow parts are functions that returning Vine template strings, which are component functions. The green part is the rest of the code, which are normal TS statements. Due to the limitation of time, we won't expand a full details of Vue.Vine usage today. If you are interested, please check out our documentation to get more details. After finishing the first version of compiler, I was super excited, and that's my first time achieving something that has really complicated design and requires a lot of work. But I know there will be more. I need to write a Vite plugin to support HMR, make a playground project as my demo. I need to write documentation to introduce this project. I need to write a language service extension for VS Code. I need to build ESLint integration for this new syntax. And I hope I can create a community around this project. Actually, I just created this project for personal learning and practice in the beginning, but I found it has some potential value, and I have gained a lot of improvements in my skills while working on it. I started to treat it as my baby and spent almost all my free time on it. I did a lot of preparation and design for this Vue.Vine's architecture, and I'm so proud of that I can easily add a new feature as a module to this project now. Effort came from one person is always limited, and that's why I love open source community. You can always find friends to cooperate with and build amazing things. Thank you to all the members of the Vue.Vine team and all the friends who have contributed to our project's code. I think we are getting more and more mature, and there are still many opportunities to improve it, which means we are looking forward to your contribution. That's all for my talk today. Thanks for your attention.
Splendid. Thank you so much. We do have a few questions for you. So let me grab those. What were the main technical challenges in developing Vue.Vine?
I think that the the most difficult part is to write the compiler, and I and the and also the most difficult part is to implement the language tools. Just because I need to borrow some part of code just from the Vue official language tools, and I have a lot of talk with Johnson, which is just Evan just talked about him in the beginnings talk, and we discussed a lot about our uh, syntax design and how to implement this with TypeScript plugin in Vue.js. And we iterate many versions of it. And for now, we have a very good IDE support in VS Code while you are writing Vue.Vine. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. How does Vue Vine's performance compare to a traditional Vue components?
Actually, it does not affect any performance level because it's just a compiler front end. It's just a tool to help you can write multiple components in one file, but uh, we all generate standard view objects, so it doesn't affect any Vue's performance, and it can leverage any Vue's new features such as the Vue Vapor mode. Yeah, we are gonna uh, do some compatible plans to just adopt Vue 3.6 and any other new version. Yeah, any other Vue features that we are gonna support later, and because we are a non-standard and non-official solution, so we will play stand it for a stable library, and we will make it usable for production, so our users could be not worry about that. Yeah.
I feel like that leads very well to our next question of what are use cases best suited for Vue Vine?
Yeah, so when you are gonna write some very very small components, just like list item view, maybe you would create a big list, and but you are writing a view that from your Figma, but and you are gonna start building your view structure, and maybe something you want to just write just next to this main component, and you gonna write a very small just fragment, and I think that's the best use case for Vue.Vine. And it doesn't I don't want to just shape what it is, because I think our user can explore more ways, because I can't expect any detailed use case for this. So as you like, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. How does Vue Vine handle type interface?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Then I really want to mention it about because for IDE level, we use Vue.js to just actually you can think that we adopt the TypeScript language service in VS Code, because Vue.js is actually what it does. It is actually the tool that does it. So we can use the IDE's TypeScript language service, and to adopt those type inference, and it's just like a flow in your editor. So this is IDE level, but in the question that we mentioned about define props, yeah, the type Vue.Vine handles it with different ways, because we use TS morph, and we adopts your project's tsconfig.json, and we see your project as a TS project, and we use TS morph to analyze all the type information. So we will resolve the props shape, and we can analyze. We can just output all the props name and to the view object. So we handled it with a different strategy with Vue compiler SFC. So that's the main difference. And actually, that what we do is better than the Vue official version, because maybe there are some bad case in Vue official version, but we are using TS Morph to just deliver standard TS. Yeah.
All right. Why do we need this if standard view render functions do their job?
Yeah, because what I mentioned about in our documentation, that if you use edge function, which we call the JS, the render function, you are probably writing very nested code, and it can leverage it cannot leverage the performance improvements by Vue 3's compilation mechanism. Yeah, that's why I'm uh, continuously stay with a Vue template. Yeah, because I think it's Vue native.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, two more questions. Viewvine has, does Viewvine have support for unit test stage?
I think if you are using Vivine, uh, I'm not quite sure about this question. What does it mean about? Because uh, we have a unit test in our own repo, and if you wanna test about the compiler output, you can check our repo's unit test. And if you want to test about your component that written in Vivine, uh, I think you can just test it with the standard Vue test utils. If you have found any questions, please send us any issue that I will fix it. Yeah.
All right, last question of can Viewvine be as official part of Vue in the future?
Uh, that's what I dream. That's what I'm dreaming about. Yeah, but I will talk about this with Evan. Maybe some days that this one could be an official part. But actually, from the beginning, I don't persuaded to be. It's not a must. Yeah, it's not a must. Yeah, because we
Awesome.
need
Thank
to
you so
be
much for oh.
invasive. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it. All right, y'all. Up next, before we go to Daniel's talk, we got to talk about the giveaways. Talk about some secret ducks. We are doing 3 giveaways during the conference with special offers and services like the scavenger hunt. If you're ready for a little challenge, we've hidden one duck in 3 different spots around the conference. If you can find all 3 locations, you could win training worth $300. Sounds fun, right? Keep your eyes peeled and submit your findings to this link right here. So go find the duck. And also your Dev Stack Story Challenge. Make sure to go submit your Dev Stack. Basically, every developer has a story. What's yours? We want to see how your journey started. Pick 3 to 4 items that represent your coding story. Snap a photo and share it on X with hashtag Vue.JSNation25. The most creative entry will win a prize worth $300. So go ahead, show us what makes your developer journey unique. And last but not least, we want to hear your experience. So take 5 minutes of your time and you could win $300 in Vue goodies. Fill out the post event survey and drop your email, and you're in the drawing. The winner will be picked after the event and notified by email. And then, of course, up next, we have Daniel Kelly with Voodoo Magic AI development tricks. And Daniel, if you haven't met him yet, you're in for a treat. Daniel is a lead instructor and content creator at Vue School and enjoys helping other developers reach their full potential. With over 10 years of dev experience on both front end and back end, He's worked on with technologies like Vue, Nux, Laravel, and more to create projects ranging from simple websites to expertise level applications. Welcome to the stage, Daniel.
Hello, everybody. So very excited to be here with you at Vue.js Nation. I am Daniel Kelly. The title of my talk is Vue Do Magic, AI Development Tricks. Now, the reason I decided on this title, okay, let's be honest, AI decided on this title. And to be honest, it's really quite fitting one, right? Because AI is still relatively new to the development world, and we're still getting our feet wet. We're still, trying to kind of figure things out. And a lot of it still feels like magic. I'm going to be honest, AI still makes me feel a little like an awkward teenager. I don't exactly know where I fit into this new AI world. It gives me a little bit of anxiety knowing, not knowing what the future of development looks like. And I don't think I'm the only one, right? I think there's probably plenty of you out there who feel somewhat the same way, but we will figure it out together. And more importantly, we must figure it out together. The one thing you absolutely cannot do is ignore AI and continue to do things the way you've always done them. You're going to fall behind. It's just a new world that we're living in, and you've got to learn how to adopt AI into your workflows. That's what this talk is all about. But why do we need to start adopting AI? Well, let's just get a quick little introduction into how AI can boost your development workflows. Number one, know that AI is a co-pilot and not a developer. You're still required in the picture. This isn't me just regurgitating things I found online. This is my experience. AI cannot do it by itself, but it will it will boost your productivity. Excuse me for one moment. Let me get a drink of water. By the way, I'm coming down with the flu, and my son has the flu in just the next room over. So if you do hear any coughing at any point, I do apologize. But AI will produce your productivity when it's used responsibly. However, it can also destroy your productivity. And I'm also saying this from experience as well. If you turn your brain off and think that, oh, okay, AI can do it all for me, then you actually end up digging yourself a bigger hole than is worth it. So, last thing here is do not believe everything you hear on social media. I don't know how many times I've seen people post, they've never written a line of code in their life, and yet they're all of a sudden making thousands of dollars with an app they wrote with AI. I just don't believe it, to be honest. In most cases, I just don't believe it. Because AI is good, but it's not that good yet. It still needs us developers to take the reins, to drive the cart, and to really point it the right direction. Yes, it's super helpful, but it can't do it all by itself. So, why AI? Of course, to produce code more quickly, but also I found since you're in the weeds of the code less, you're in some of the actual details of the code less, you're fighting with the little things less, it actually helps to surface solutions that you never even thought about. And it helps you think in a higher business level kind of need, right? So yeah, we were thinking about our users before, but we also had to think a lot about the technical implementation details. Because we can think less now about some of those technical implementation details. I didn't say not about them, but less about them. We're able to focus a little bit more on the real end goal, right? Which is user experience and business needs. Okay, so in order to develop this talk, I thought it would be good to have a little case study app to really make some of the concepts concrete. So I built this textbook exam generator. Essentially, you scan in pages from a hard copy textbook, and that uses AI to produce an interactive exam based on the content of that textbook. That's exactly what you see here. So we're going to learn two things from this little case study. Number one, we're going to learn with just a few clicks, and it's super, super fast. I actually use this quite a bit. So Photoshop, it's still around. It's still very, very powerful. I am Daniel Kelly. I am the lead instructor at Vue School. You can find me at DanielKelly_IO on Twitter. I am still hanging out there for now. But if you want my slides for this talk, and that uses AI to produce an interactive exam based on the content of that textbook. That's exactly what you see here. So we're going to learn two things from this little case study. Number one, we're going to learn how did I use AI to help me develop this case study, but how did I also integrate AI into the app to make it more user-friendly? So we're talking about AI for DX as well as AI for UX, right? Okay, so let's tackle that first concept first, using AI to write code. Excuse me. First things first, you do need to download Cursor. I drug my feet on this for a little while, but you really have to do it. For those who are coming from Visual Studio Code, it's a really easy transition since it's a fork. Okay? Why download Cursor? Well, it has inline AI autocompletion, just like GitHub Copilot. That's not super special. It also has AI chat. That's not super special. GitHub Copilot also has that. But the real win is the composer. Okay? So the composer does more than just generate some code in the next few lines of your file. It does more than just talk to you about your code in your open file. It actually can generate code in multiple files. You can give it a prompt and it can write code. It can search through your code base and write code in multiple different places. It could even run commands in your terminal. It'll give you the little command and show you, and you can just click it and it'll run. All of these changes that it makes automatically are easily managed or reverted with Git. So it's fully compatible with your version control system. It even writes files to the system before you accept those changes. You'll see what I mean by that in just a moment. But essentially, it means you could see the output of the code in your browser that the LLM generates, and you can say, okay, does this meet my needs or not? And then you can commit those things. Therefore, the composer is great for all kinds of use cases. It's great for generating components, for generating tests, or even full features. Let's give it a quick try with a full feature. Now, I don't suggest this method most often, to be honest. It's expecting a little too much of it. But let's just see what happens, because I want you to see what all it's able to do inside of this composer window. So back over in my browser, do notice that I have a settings page, but when I click on it, nothing happens. There is no settings page for users yet. Let's try asking the composer to make one. So make a settings page for the user to configure common user settings, as well as exam creation preferences. Okay, so this is a pretty vague prompt, and I wouldn't do this in a real world scenario. I would be more specific, but let's just see what it outputs. It says, I'll help you create a settings page. First, let's check the existing code base. So this is awesome. This is what I want you to see. It actually searches through your code base to find relevant files. You don't necessarily have to manually add context. You can come down here and type @ and then add context of what files it should be aware of, what documentation it should be aware of. You can even link different URLs, so different docs on the web. So you can manually provide context, but it's also decently smart enough to search through and find some context. Next, it it goes and searches to see, okay, where should I create the necessary components and page. It found my schema file. So it says, okay, I do need to make an update to the database. This is the really cool part. This is also what I want you to see. So it actually runs my linter on the file to check, are there any lint errors after the changes have made, and there are not. Then it goes and creates the settings page as a component. By the way, I am using Nuxt in this applications. So we're creating API endpoints inside of API/users/settings. That looks great. It's defining an event handler here, which is how it should do it in Nuxt. Awesome. It comes across an error. It cannot find the name server Supabase user. So I'm using Supabase for the authentication system in this application. It picked up on that based on the rest of the code base and some of my cursor rules. But it ran and said, okay, there's a error here. Let me try to fix it. And it did. Look at there. It imported the proper thing. Now it creates another endpoint for updating. And then finally, it updates the navigation. So this navigation item right here, it looks like it found it. And it knows that's what we want to link to the page. Okay, very cool. Back over my browser now, I'm just going to give the page a refresh. And then let's try going to settings. Sweet, that worked. Here we have a theme preference, which is a common user setting, right? And here's some exam preferences. The default question type, notification preferences, that's a common preference as well. If I hit save changes, it looks like nothing happens. If I open up and check out the console, yeah, we do have an internal server error. So it's definitely not perfect, but it bootstrapped a lot of these files that were necessary for me to create manually, and I don't have to do that anymore. I can just tweak them now according to my needs. So that's pretty cool. Like I said, this is probably a little too much to ask it to do all at one time. It's actually quite amazing how far it actually got. Okay. So let's talk about a little bit more realistic scenario where we generate a single component from the composer. In this case, I'm generating this file upload dialog. I totally did this completely with the composer when I was creating this application. You'll notice it had error handling built in. It said, oh, I can't upload that image type. I didn't have to do that. Even gave a way to remove each of the different images before upload, and it showed previews of all the images. I literally didn't have to do any manual coding with that. It took me maybe 15-20 minutes to get this working. So a huge time saver. This is the prompt I used, or at least something similar to this, in order to generate this component. Like I said, it did take some back and forth. But essentially, I told it I needed an image upload component. It should appear in the modal overlay. It should accept multiple files and use Supabase storage to store the files and display preview. Okay, I told it fairly specifically the things that I wanted. Now, the response here is actually that we already have such a component, because I just, for the sake of this slide, tried to get it to do it again after I'd already created it. But yeah, look at there. Look how cool. It searched my code base and says, I already have a file for this. Let's just use it. Okay, so some general tips for generating components with the composer. Of course, be specific about what you want. Use .cursor rules to specify preferences and steer the LLM away from common mistakes. Don't expect a perfect working solution out of the box. Okay? For those of you who don't know what .cursor rules is, it's basically just this kind of hint to send along to the LLM with every prompt that tells it a little bit more about your preferences and the structure of your application. Okay? Let me close this right here, and I'll show you my full .cursor rules. Once again, this is a Nuxt project, but I have about 177 lines of cursor rules in here. These are the rules that specifically have to deal with components. Notice I tell it that Shadcn Vue is installed. Okay, so I tell it how to create these new and install these new Shadcn components. I give it some logic around how do I want my components to be separated. Dumb components, those that only are worried about presentation, should be named in one way and should be broken up from components that deal with, talking to the database, talking to the backend, things like that. So I also tell it about just my general preferences. I want to use TypeScript to define all components. I want to use JS docs to document the component props and emits. I have a particular order that I like my component sections to exist in. And then a good example of kind of fixing common errors is this bit right here. I found that over and over again, it would use $fetch inside of the root level of script setup, which duplicates requests on both client and server. So I just told it, hey, don't do that anymore, right? After it happened 3 or 4 times, I said, don't do that anymore. Instead, use fetch in the root of script setup and only use $fetch to react to different user events, so on and so forth. And I gave it an example. This is huge. This is a good takeaway right here. In your cursor rules, provide examples. Examples go so much further than you just trying to explain yourself in plain English or whatever language you use. Okay? All right, so those are my cursor rules for components. Now, you can also use AI to generate a unit test. I didn't do that for this project, but in general, I've found that generating a unit test will use vtest in the context of a Vue project. It does generate relevant test cases specifically. Of course, you do have to tweak it a little bit, but just like with components, they are a great starting point. Okay, here are some general workflow tips when generating code with the composer. Number 1, generate a log of features. In your cursor rules file, just tell it, hey, when you create a new feature or create a new component or create a new test inside of the composer, write to a file, the central file somewhere that logs those changes so that it has more context moving forward. Absolutely don't generate everything from scratch. Use existing libraries, etc. I definitely ran into this rabbit hole where I tried to generate an entire user management system from scratch. It was just much easier just to install something that already works and tell the LLM that I have it installed, right? Provide screenshots. So if you're looking to update, particular pieces of the UI, take a screenshot of the UI, use your little, editing tools on your computer to circle what you want changed. And I found that really helps narrow down in the LLM, it really helps narrow down what you're talking about, right? Commit early, commit often. It's a great rule for just developer life in general, but really applies to working with AI-generated code because it can screw things up really, really quickly. It can help you, but it can also screw things up really, really quickly. So make sure you can get back to a good working point. Of course, don't trust the bot. Always review generated code. Don't try to do everything at one time and describe in detail what you use the .cursor rules file to define your coding preferences and common patterns within your application, like we saw just a moment ago. Slow down. Slow down. I found it very tempting when generating code with AI to move quick, 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 because the AI is quick, quick, quick. But if I didn't stop and actually read what it output, I found myself getting into trouble fairly quickly. So slow down. Don't trust everything it says. Read things. Pretend it's a conversation with a junior developer. Tweak things along the way. Overall, just slow your mindset down. Okay? I promise you, even though you are slowed down in one sense, your productivity is actually sped up, which is great for everybody. You get a less rushed, a less hectic, less frustrated, work lifestyle, and you produce more than you ever have before. Copy and paste examples of your API payloads, JSON data, etc., to pass to the LLM. So when you're talking about data in the chat, give it an example of it. Okay, so that's developing with AI. Now let's talk about integrating AI into your app. I know we've got to move kind of fast now. There are lots of different use cases. Just a few might be extracting text from image, like in our little example application, generating image alts. AI is really good about seeing what's in an image and then describing it, translating text into different languages, empowering smarter searches that allow for more semantic searches with RAG, summarizing content, generating images and video. The use cases go on and on. Here are my tips for using AI in your apps. Number 1 is use the right model for the right task. You've probably heard this before, but here's a concrete example of this. When I first started working on this little exam project here, I was using the Claude 3 Opus model, the smartest one, in order to scan those pages and generate text from those pages. Well, that took about 35 seconds on average and cost me about 9 cents per page, which is terrible, right? However, just by switching the model, one little line of my code to Claude 3.5 Sonnet, I was able to save more than half of the time, and I was able to get the cost down to a penny per page, which is still pretty expensive, yes, but it's a whole lot better than 9 cents. The idea here is that there are lots of different models available. Play with different ones and see which one still gives you a great result, but for a cheaper price and at a faster speed. Just like when you're actually chatting to Cursor, when you're implementing prompts inside of your code, provide examples in your prompts. So let me show you what this looks like. Over inside of, I've got a file here called anthropic.service, and here is a function called extract text from the page. All right, notice here I am using Claude 3.5 Sonnet, but this is what I'm passing to the LLM. Please extract and return all of the text content from this textbook page. Format it naturally, preserving paragraphs, headings, and any important structural elements. Output the text in a markdown format to preserve structures like lists, tables, headings, etc. So I'm being very specific about what I want, and then I'm providing it an example of the string that I want it to return. And I tell it, do not return anything else. Only return to me a JSON object with a page number. So it grabs the page number from the scan page and then the actual text in markdown format. Notice here is, I've got a nice little example in here about what I want, a little description about what I want this data to be. The page number of the textbook, page if found as a string, otherwise null. Okay, so provide those examples in your prompts. And it's really that easy, right? You're just talking and playing English. You're not, they say that prompt engineering is this big thing, right? It's really just about being specific about what you want. Just be very specific about what you want, okay? And examples are a great way to be specific. And then ask for JSON-only responses. I talked to somebody very recently about this. They said, how in the world can you actually develop an app with AI, right? It's just text. Well, actually, JSON is just text too, right? So you can turn these text-based responses into these snazzy user interfaces by asking for JSON. That's exactly how I'm getting, so on this exam right here, that's exactly how I'm getting these questions, right? This JSON comes back from the LLM, and I just write components, or I have Cursor write components for me that understand that JSON format and then are able to display UI based on that. Okay. By the way, XML works really great too in your prompts. So over inside of this file called create test prompt, I'm using XML to kind of, this is a long prompt, so I'm using XML to kind of break up the different sections in it. Here's some general instructions. Here's my example exam. So this is the prompt to create the actual exam. So to turn the textbook page text into this JSON that actually powers an exam. And I'm using XML to break everything up. It really likes that because it's very well structured. Okay. Another thing you're going to have to do when working in apps with AI is you need to mitigate latency. It's just slow. It's the way it is, right? So you can do this by either streaming responses or using some kind of job queue. You need a JSON object back, you really can't stream. But if you just need straight text back, more like a chatbot, then go ahead and stream it. Job queues, though, are super simple to set up in the context of a Nuxt application. This is exactly what I'm doing inside of the exam app, okay? There's just a database table somewhere with the scans in there. They have a status of not processed or something like that. And this job just goes and grabs everything from the table that's not processed. And then in the background, where the user doesn't have to wait for a response, in the background, it goes and sends these pages off to the LLM to be processed. Okay? Another thing that is extremely useful is chunking larger requests to the LLMs into smaller pieces, but then pass along a summary of the content. For example, when I was generating larger exams, like 30 questions long, the LLM would come back with just 10 questions, even though I expressly told it to generate 30 questions. It was simply using up all of its tokens. So what I did is when it came back with 10 questions, I counted how many questions it came back with in my code because I could JSON parse its response, right? I could just do an array length. I counted those and I said, okay, how many are left to get to my desired result? I sent the prompt back to the LLM a second time, but this time asking only for 20 questions, and then also providing the just the questions that it gave me before, not all the options for the questions, not everything I gave it before, but just enough context to know, hey, you already created these questions for me, don't duplicate those, right? So chunk your prompts into smaller pieces to get back larger responses, right? But make sure you pass along context from previous prompts as necessary. Okay, finally, maybe the most exciting part of this talk, because hey, it's fun to talk about tooling. Let's talk about some useful tools that I've found just on the internet. So database.build is a really great way to enter a prompt for an app you're trying to build. This example uses a social media scheduling tool like Buffer, and it generates some schema, some database schema for what an app like that might need. And then you can just export this as SQL. Really interesting for brainstorming and figuring things out. In terms of SQL land, Supabase SQL, the Supabase dashboard inside of their SQL, little client, they actually have AI built right in. It can help you write queries, debug query issues, set up RLS policies, and a whole lot more. So I use this a decent amount actually in another project I'm doing outside of Vue School. Bolt.new is a really handy editor for bootstrapping micro apps very quickly. In my opinion, it's really only good for micro apps at this point, though a lot of people are using it for more than just micro apps, but it really does a lot of the same things Cursor does, but in a more junior developer friendly kind of way. People who have never worked with code before, right? They can just visit it directly in their browser and start doing things. This little example that you're seeing on the screen now is a gamer themed blog that I created with literally like 4 prompts and in 10, 20 minutes, something like that. Very, very quick, and it actually looks really, really nice, and it works. The commenting system was the most complicated part about it, and it handled it with just a few prompts. The whole rest of the site was actually done in a single prompt. So there's that available. There's, of course, also Claude, which is a general ChatGPT alternative. This is my go-to nowadays. I don't use ChatGPT anymore. I found that Claude typically writes better code, can even run some of that code. For example, the other day, I had a spreadsheet that I wanted to get some nice visualizations for. I just dropped the spreadsheet into Claude, told it to what I wanted to visualize as a bar chart, and it did it. It generated some React code and actually ran the React code and showed me a nice little bar chart right there in the interface. Finally, there is Photoshop. Yes, I'm a little bit old school, but check this out. If you are a web designer, maybe more so than a developer, or if you dabble in a little bit of both, the AI tooling in Photoshop really it's not worth sneezing at. It's very, very powerful. You can remove objects, just like you saw there on the screen. You can generate brand new objects inside a certain area of the picture with just a few clicks, and it's super, super fast. I actually use this quite a bit. So Photoshop, it's still around. It's still very, very powerful. I am Daniel Kelly. I am the lead instructor at Vue School. You can find me at DanielKelly_IO on Twitter. I am still hanging out there for now. But if you want my slides for this talk, as well as my .cursor rules that I used for the exam project, then I will tweet those out after this talk. Give me a follow so you don't miss it. Finally, are you interested in learning more about AI with an AI for Developers masterclass? We're considering building just such a course with the content team here at Vue School. So if you are interested in this and you want to become an AI master when it comes to developing apps, then scan the QR code that you see on the screen. We'll all learn a little something together as we try to navigate this new AI world that we find ourselves living in. It's just a quick survey. It's just going to ask for your email, and you can, if we end up actually making the course, we'll give you details about that in your email inbox. All right, that is all from me, everyone. Thank you so very much for your time and attention. Now go code some awesome things with Vue and maybe some AI as well. See you later.
Hey, Jen. Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm not sure why. I think it's on my side, though.
No, it's on my side. My mic keeps disconnecting today. I'm not sure why. Just like all of a sudden. Can you hear me now?
Oh, no.
Uh-oh. Audience, can you hear
I'm
me?
looking on my side.
Okay. Daniel is working on figuring it out.
Hey, can you hear me, Jen?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. It looks like you
No.
can hear me, but I still can't hear you. I think I've got something going on with my audio. I'm happy to answer questions. I can see them on the screen. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll try
Let
it
me
and see
try
if you can
hopping out
read the
and
question.
hopping right back in.
Okay. Okay. Well, we do have questions for Daniel coming up. So we'll see if we can get that figured out. Please stand by. Thank you, everyone, for letting me know you can hear me. That's good. Hopefully we can figure out why Daniel can't. And I mean, this is a great break for you to go sign up for um, the AI information, the masterclass. So make sure to go do that. I can show you. I will show you in Vito in the meantime. If you just go to the AI masterclass for developers. I know we just talked about it, but go sign up. I'll sign up. We'll sign up while we wait for Daniel. What talk? Ooh, vector databases, integrating. I'm super dyslexic, so voice and speech AI is practical projects. I like how LLM works. So hello, okay. Submit. I am signed up. Yes. Thank you for completing this form. How many of you have completed the form? Curious. But other things you can check out. Oh, Daniel might be back. Can you hear me
Hey,
now?
Jen. Oh, no, I still can't hear you. I'm so sorry.
Okay. We will just do banners. I'll read them.
This will be
Okay.
fun.
How do you efficiently
All
prompt
right,
AI tools for Vue specific tasks?
let me try answering this question here. So, how do you effectively prompt AI tools for Vue specific tasks? The having some rules in that cursor rules file is probably a big start. Kind of give it some preferences there. Sorry, I'm still just trying to figure out if there's a different way I could hear you. You know what? I bet I could hear you outside of our streaming platform. I bet I could hear you on the actual live stream, but that's probably going to be delayed, though, isn't it? Let me see if I can. Okay. Yeah, that's super fine behind. Sorry about that, y'all. But yeah, the duck cursor rules is probably your best bet there.
All right.
What strategies do you use to review and validate AI generated code? Really, it's just a matter of, you know, reviewing what it wrote. I mean, the quickest thing you can do is run the code, right, and see if it takes the output that you're looking for. But then a lot of times you do want to actually read the code afterwards, because it may be, outputting what you want, but it may be going a long roundabout way of doing that. So yeah, always read what it generates. And do you have good cursor rules for Vue, especially when telling the AI to use the new features from Vue? Yeah, I've the cursor rules that I use for this project I can share. Mostly I've found that you just have to tell it, hey, you want to use the composition API and script setup, and after that it gets most things right. Like, those are the biggest things that it usually starts to try the options API first, but otherwise it's once you tell it you prefer script setup and the composition API, it's usually pretty good, but about most everything else from then on. Is the source code for that project open to the public? I haven't put it up on GitHub. It's just on my local machine. I might do that. I'm gonna make sure I didn't do anything. Like, I never intended to release it publicly, so there might be like a key in there or something that that shouldn't be available to just anyone. But if there is, I'll remove it, and I'll consider releasing that. I'll share on my Twitter afterwards. If I do end up releasing that, I'll share it on my Twitter. But I definitely will release the cursor rules. I'll show those cursor rules on Twitter for everybody. Thanks so very much, Jed.
All right, y'all. Thank you for working with us as we're figuring out when we have tech issues. I love that we were still able to do our Q&A with Daniel. So up next, a quick word about Mastering Next. Did you know that Mastering Next 3 course is completely hands-on? You will build a complete online course platform, including a database and a blazing fast landing page to sell the course utilizing technologies like Vue.js, Next3, and Vue.js. Only on the Mastering Next website, you can find the Super Bundle. Why do we call it the Super Bundle? Well, because it contains 4 masterclass courses. Vue.js masterclass courses for options and composition APIs, as well as Next2 and Next3 Masterclass, all for a massive discount. So don't forget, if you buy Next3 now, you'll also get the Next4 update at no cost to you. It's kind of like a 2-for-1 sale. So make sure to go sign up and get the Mastering Next course available for 30% off during the conference. All right. And up next, we have Michael Thiessen, How to Write Better Composables. Michael is an experienced front-end developer and author who is passionate about helping Vue.js developers level up their skills. With thousands of developers already helped through his independent courses, he's now partnered up with Vue School and Next Labs to bring you Mastering Next 3 and help you get the most out of this incredible framework. Welcome to the stage, Michael.
Hey everyone, glad to be here with you, and thanks Daniel for doing that. Even though you're feeling sick, I hope you do get better. Yeah. So today I'm going to share with you all about composables and how we can write better composables. So first of all, I want to give a quick overview of who I am if you're not familiar with me, which is probably most of you. I do this whole Vue education thing full time. I'm self-employed. I create courses and things like that. I have a podcast called Vue with Alex Lichter. You'll see him tomorrow give a talk, and we've got a bunch of awesome episodes on there. I think we're approaching 50 episodes now. We've got different guests on there and deep dives into technical topics in the Vue and Nuxt ecosystem, and it's pretty awesome if you ask me. But of course, I'm a little bit biased. I also have a newsletter that I send out every week on Wednesdays, specifically with Vue and Nuxt tips and articles and events and all sorts of stuff in there. So if you enjoy that kind of a thing, that's there for you. I'll share all these links at the end of my talk. And as Jen mentioned, I also am the instructor for Mastering Nuxt, which is the official course on Nuxt. And we finished recording that one about 2 years ago now. And so we do have some news on that, which I'll share at the end as well. And of course, I've got all sorts of different kinds of content. I did say that this was my job. So I'm, every day learning about Vue, learning about Nuxt, figuring out the latest features, figuring out how to use them better, and creating courses and books and talks like this, videos, all that sort of stuff, so that I can learn some things and then teach it to all of you and hopefully help you out, make your development lives a little bit easier. So with that said, the first pattern that we're going to cover today is the flexible arguments pattern. So in this example here on the left, we've got, your standard composable example, a counter. We define the count as a ref at the top, and then we've got some methods to increment and decrement it. And on the right-hand side, we can use that composable in a component. So pretty straightforward, nothing too interesting going on here yet. But if we want to, let's say, change the default value or the starting value that we're going to start our count with, to do that, we need to add in this argument, and we can set the argument to have a default of 0. And then on the right-hand side where we have our component, we can pass in 38 and or any other number that we want, and we can get it to start on any number. So okay, that's pretty straightforward, not too interesting yet there. But what if we want to use a ref? Very often we end up with refs from other places. For example, if we have a data store or a Pina store somewhere, we might get that count ref from that store. Or if we're using Vue use and we're connecting it up to local storage or session storage, we might get our ref from that composable. So what if we want to pass that ref in and then use that as our count? Well, we actually don't need to change anything at all, because the way that ref works is if we pass in a ref, it will just return that ref back. But if we pass in a value, like a JavaScript value, like a number or a string or any of these, it will wrap it. So it has these sort of two modes of working, where in one case, it will give you the ref back, or it will wrap and create the ref. So no matter what we pass in to this composable, we actually get that ref back. And if we look at the TypeScript for this, we can see that Vue provides us with this maybe ref or getter, and that's exactly what this value is. It's a number, and it might be a ref, and it might be a getter, but the very least we know that it is a number. So it could be one of these 3 different values. And if you're not familiar with what a getter is, it's basically just a function that returns a value. So if you pass that in to the ref, it'll use that to set up the value, and we go from there. So no matter what we pass in, whether it's a number or a ref that has a number, we can use that reactively within our composable. We can also do sort of the inverse or opposite, depending on how you think about it. So let's look at this composable here. We have use logger, and we're going to take in a ref, and every time that ref changes, we will log it out. So when we use it in our component, we define this ref with hello world. We pass it into the logger. It'll log it out immediately because we're using watch effect. And then if we change that value to hello Vue Nation, then it'll log that new value out because it's reactive. But what if we don't have a ref and all we have is just a string? Now, in this case, this line here no longer works because a string does not have a .value property. So what can we do? Well, we have this method in Vue called toValue, and we can use that, and it does effectively the opposite of what ref does. And no matter what we pass into toValue, it will take that and return the raw underlying value back to us. So if we pass in a ref, it will unwrap that, give us the value. If we pass in just a plain string like we have here, it will just give us back that plain string. And we can look at the types again, and here we get the exact same type. We either get this plain value, a ref, or a getter, and no matter which one of these we pass into toValue, it will return back that underlying value. And so again, in this way, if we need to use this raw value in our composable, we can set it up in this way using toValue, and it doesn't matter how we, like what values we pass in, it'll always work. And so that is the flexible arguments pattern, that when we need a value to be reactive within our composable, we will use ref. And if we need it to be a primitive, non-reactive value, then we can use toValue to extract that out. And we'll see how to use this more in the third pattern that I'll share with you today. And again, just to summarize, the benefit of this pattern is that no matter how we use the composable, we can make it work. So many times I've written composables where it expects a ref, but I don't have a ref, or it expects a string, but I actually have a ref of that string. And rewriting your composables to use this pattern allows you to work them in any scenario. The second pattern is the data store pattern. And this is maybe one of the more controversial ones, I'll say, but also one of the ones that I think is the most valuable. And I actually had someone who took one of my workshops in which I shared this pattern, and he came up to me about a year later and said, you know, at first I thought this pattern was kind of useless, but eventually we actually started to use this everywhere in our code base. So maybe you'll be one of those people who says, why would you use this? But eventually you'll come around to it. And here we're going to solve some problems with state management. So we have a bunch of different problems. We have prop drilling, we have event frothing, and we have cousin components. So you've probably heard of prop drilling before. It's where we pass props down layer after layer after layer after layer, and these props are not even used in these intermediate layers. They're just components that are taking in a prop and passing it down to the next component. And this has all sorts of problems. It makes your code really tedious and brittle. If you make changes, it's easy to break things because you don't realize that these props are getting passed around, and it just creates a big mess. Event frothing is the same idea, but for events. And so props are passed down through the component tree and events are bubbled up. So event frothing is when we bubble these events up and up and up and up through layer after layer of components. And The same as with prop drilling, we have a whole bunch of issues with that. Now, lastly, we have this idea of cousin components. So we've got parent and child components, we've got sibling components, but we also have cousin components. And these are basically just components that live far apart in the component tree. And if we want to have some piece of state that is shared between them, it can be really difficult, especially if we want to avoid prop drilling and event frothing. But the way that we can solve this is through the data store pattern, where we essentially take the state out of the component tree entirely into this separate piece that allows us to inject our state into each component exactly where it's needed. And we will use a composable to do this. And this composable has a few different parts to it. The first part is that we need a global state singleton so that any component can access it. The second piece is that we need to export some of that state so that we can actually share it and use it. And lastly, we're going to add on some methods that work on that state, because we like to have methods and functions that work on state right next to the state that they work on, so that everything's co-located nicely and we can easily scan our code base and understand what's going on. So first, we're going to set up this global state singleton. So we have this composable use user settings, and we're going to have it basically keep track of different settings that someone might have in a UI. So we've got dark mode, is the sidebar collapsed or not, and the code editor theme here. Now I've set this up to use reactive because it's in some ways a bit nicer than having ref, because we can add in this object. I would allow, I think reactive or ref is perfectly fine. I don't have like a strong bias towards one or the other in this particular instance, but I've done reactive here just because it's a little simpler in terms of syntax. But if you have, worked ahead, you might have noticed that there's a problem with this, in that every single time we use this composable, it will actually recreate this state. And this state variable will get overwritten, or not overwritten, but it will be a new one created for every single time that we use this, which is not what we want. We want to share this globally. So to do that, we need to move that state value out into the module scope. So now it will only be created once when this module is loaded up. And then every single time we use this composable in all sorts of different components across our application, it will still reference the same state variable here. The second part of this is to actually extract some of that state. So for now, we're going to leave the theme aside. We're going to say that we're going to keep that private in a way. And so what we're going to do here is look at dark mode and sidebar collapsed. And you'll notice here that at this first line that I've highlighted, we use 2 refs on our state. And what this does is it wraps every single value in our reactive object with a ref. And this is important because it allows us to pass around each of these variables individually. And so we can give a component just the dark mode value or just the sidebar collapsed value. We don't have to give it the entire state object all at once. But also, when we do this, it will still maintain that reactivity back to this original state object here in our user settings data store. If we want to use this in a component, we would import it. Then we can destructure this dark mode value off of it. Because we've already done the 2 refs, we don't need to do it again here. And then we can use it just like we would any other value. We can toggle it, we can use it in our template, and so on. the third and final piece of this pattern is to take this and actually add in some business logic. So now we'll address this theme setting that we've got. So we're pulling it out of our state here using 2refs, and at the end we're returning it, but we've wrapped it in a read only because we don't want anyone to just be able to modify it however they want. Instead, we're going to add in our own change theme method. And this method basically just checks against a predefined list of themes so that we can guarantee that the theme that they're trying to set it to actually exists. And if so, we can actually reference state.theme directly, and we can update our theme. And that's all that we need to do. And we've got a nice business logic method in here to modify our state. So those are the three pieces of the data store pattern: the global state singleton, exposing some of that state using the 2refs, and then adding in business logic to work on that state. At this point, this is where we get to the controversial point, and you may be wondering, okay, well, okay, I missed some slides here. I got ahead of myself. Of course, you have to export the function, and there we go, some highlighting on it. You might be wondering at this point, oh, well, why not just use Pina? Like, isn't that what we have Pina for? And that's a very good question, which is why I have this slide. And this is something I've actually talked to Eduardo about a couple of times. Eduardo, who is the creator of Pina, and we actually had one of these conversations on the Deja Vu podcast. So I highly recommend you go check that out. We talk about when to use Pina and when not to use Pina, and also how to use Pina and a bunch of other things. And there's a few things I'd like to mention here, and that is, first of all, this pattern is nice because we can understand what Pina is actually doing a little bit better. So even if you never use this on its own and you only ever use Pina, now you have at least a bit of a better understanding of what Pina is doing. Number two is that this is a simpler method. You can simplify it and have it be just what you need it to be. And because it's your own code, you can have it do whatever you want. You can have it return just a plain object. You can have it return a single value or literally anything, because it's your own code. You can do whatever you want with it. However, there is the downside in that it is not a battle-tested piece of code. It doesn't support SSR. It doesn't hook into dev tools. But there are these other things to consider. And just to be clear, I would like to state that I'm not saying you shouldn't use Pina. I'm just trying to explain that if you want, there is this alternative. Like the person who took my workshop, you might end up using it and might find value in this. So I have one last pattern before my time is up here. And this is a bit of a shorter one. And the idea with this pattern is that we want our composables to be a thin reactive layer around some plain old JavaScript or TypeScript code. And this is beneficial for a couple of reasons. It makes it easier to test, makes it more modular. It's not tied to Vue or any specific library or framework. And generally, more modular, less coupled code is better for a bunch of different reasons. So we've got this composable here called use greeting. And we take in a user from our data store, and we have a computed value here that computes a greeting for that user. And that's all that this one does. And if we have a user, we return one thing. If not, we return a different thing. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a new file called user logic. And we'll just add this greeting method in there as a plain old JavaScript file. And we're going to make this a pure function. And a pure function is one where all we're doing is taking in an input and then returning a value. It doesn't do anything else. And this type of function is super, super simple to understand, but also really easy to test because there's nothing fancy going on. There's no reactivity. There's no other funny business happening. It's very, very, very straightforward. So we add this method in, and then we can come back to our composable, and we can refactor it to use this method instead. And the key piece here is this user.value, where we're unwrapping that reactivity in order to access that name, that we can pass that just plain old JavaScript value into this function. And so you maybe remember from the first pattern that we looked at, we can use toValue instead, and it will always unwrap that ref or whatever value we pass it to give us the underlying value. And so that's the end of my talk. Those are the 3 patterns I wanted to share with you today. If you want to know more about composable design patterns like this, I, a few weeks ago, released an entire course on this, and it has 16 of these patterns. We go really in depth and discuss the trade-offs and the pros and cons of the different things. And we have step-by-step examples of how to refactor using these. And you can find that at my website /composable design patterns. I think if you Google that, you'll also find it. I also said at the beginning that we had some things to share about mastering Nuxt. Well, it's been about 2 years since the last one was recorded, and 2 years, some things have gotten out of date, which is why we are recording the entire thing again. I'm actively working on it. Actually, I was just before this talk working on the code base, and we will be completely re-recording the course. Existing customers will get it, which is good news because it's 30% off right now, which means you could buy it right now and learn a whole bunch of things, most of which has actually not changed a whole lot because the fundamentals of using Nuxt are still the same. And then when the new one is released at some point in the near-ish future, then you can, get that one and go through that all at the same time. And you can find that at masteringnuxt.com. And that is it for me. Thank you for watching and paying attention. And I hope you learned something valuable from this talk. Here are a bunch of my links. You can find me in basically anywhere.
Thank you, Michael. We do have quite a few questions for you.
All right.
Up first, if there were only one pattern to teach someone how to write better composables, what would it be?
Oh, wow. That's a hard question. I think the flexible arguments one applies to most composables, and I think most composables would benefit from that.
All right.
Yeah.
What's an advantage of writing a composable for the purpose on your own instead of simply using Pina?
Yeah, so it's basically like what I was saying. If you want something that's just going to be like, you want to return a specific type of value, want to return an array or just like a single value instead of using the reactive object that PNU returns, then you can use that as well.
All right. And should someone use a Pina store inside the composable instead of moving the state outside of the function?
Yeah, so I think if I understand the question correctly, then yes, you could. Yeah, you can just use a Pina store in your composable, and Pina manages all of the making sure things are global and all that.
Thank you. Data store is an interesting pattern. Do you know if it's lighter than Pina in terms of, for example, component mounting time?
I haven't tested this, but I would imagine that Pina has, Pina is quite lightweight already on its own, but I would imagine that because you're just writing the code that, like, literally just the code that you saw on the slides here, it's going to be a lot less. And whether that actually translates into measurable terms of measurable difference, I don't know. But it wouldn't be slower. I'll tell you that much.
All right, last question. How to manage types when using read-only with a database or data store pattern? Do they need to type all consuming functions components with read-only as well?
I actually don't know about this one. I don't know, but that's a very good question.
All right.
I'll have to look into that one.
We got a awesome. Well, that's it for us. Thank you, Michael, for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, y'all. Up next, it is break time. So make sure, as we said earlier, we are putting all socials on hold until break. So now is your time to post it in the chat. Let us know what your favorite things that you've been learning so far. Go do your DevStack story. Go find the ducks. And we will see you back shortly.